UVCE Chronicles, sing it loud. Echoes of our past, we're proud. From the heart of Bangalore to the world we soar.
So, hello to all the viewers and listeners. Welcome to another exciting episode of UVCE Chronicles. My name is Asshray Sudhakar from 5th Sem Electronics and Communication Engineering Department, and in today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Sanjay Swamy. Sanjay Swamy graduated in the year 1987 from the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. Welcome to the UVC Chronicles, sir, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Here at UVC Chronicles, we believe that nothing is better than the first-hand introduction of the guest himself. So, can you please give a first-hand introduction about yourself?
Okay, my pleasure. I hope you have enough time for us. I'm Sanjay Swamy. I guess, in reverse chronological order, I'm now a managing partner at a venture capital fund called Prime Venture Partners. We are an early stage technology focused VC fund, and we invest in companies largely in India, with also some SaaS companies around that are US focused. Um, and I've been doing this for the last 14 years now. And we have about $500 million in committed capital, about $1 billion of AUM. Um, we are very early investors in companies. Some of the well-known ones um, are companies like MyGate, companies like Neo, companies like WheelsEye, Quizzes. In all cases, we have always been the first institutional investors. And many of our companies, we do about 4 to 5 new investments a year, are getting ready now and starting to hit scale. So it's very exciting for me to see companies which, when we fund them, are almost at the pre-revenue stage or may have a very little bit of early stage revenues. And as you work with the companies over 10 years or 7 years, you see them go through various stages. Some might not be successful. And the dream, of course, is when these companies go all the way and become publicly traded companies. And yeah, it's a great time to be an entrepreneur and a VC in India. And I see myself fundamentally as an entrepreneur. We run our VC fund differently, and that's the business we are in. But I'm here to build and back, some great companies in India. So that's what I do today. My journey getting here, prior to this, I was a full-time volunteer on the Aadhaar program in the first year and a half of the journey, and helped with conceiving all the basic infrastructure concepts of Aadhaar, the applications of Aadhaar, how it could be used, the use of the mobile in Aadhaar, conceived literally the first experiences and thoughts on eKYC well before Aadhaar had been issued. And then, of course, continued in parallel as an evangelist for Aadhaar, UPI, India Stack, and so on, and was deeply involved in all of that infrastructure development. I'm a bit of a purist in this. I refuse to touch cash. I have not seen any Indian currency for the last 7 years, and I don't do business with anyone that needs to do business in cash. I only deal with UPI or whatever other electronic forms of payments. That's something that I believe is core to the success of the nation. Um, and prior to this, I was one of the first mobile payments entrepreneurs in India, a company called MCheck, which ended up not succeeding. It was well before its day, the right time, way before Paytm and the others, and built a lot of experience and understanding in financial services and fintech at the space. I've also lived and worked for several years in Silicon Valley, and have 2 master's degrees in avionics, one from University of Washington, Seattle, and the other from France's National Aerospace School, Super in Toulouse. And I did both of those back to back right after my graduation from UBC in 1987. So that's a quick background. Grew up in Odisha till I was 10. My dad was a part of the setting up of the MiG engine factory. He was in the Air Force and later in HAL. And it's sort of a timely moment here. He would have turned 100 years old had he been alive this month. And we're also retiring the MiG 21, which was something that he had a big role to play in. So um, was very fortunate to have experienced some of these stories secondhand at home, and it just very chill, relaxed, enjoy what I'm doing, and that's what has kept me going over the years. So this is condensing 61 years into 3 minutes.
That was indeed a very beautiful introduction, sir. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm sure that our listeners will also find it really helpful to have known a bit of your background as well. So, if we were to start from your college days, can you share a couple of memorable moments or incidents from your college days and can you please share how UVC was back then?
Um, so I'm actually a third generation UVC student. My grandfather was in the first batch of civil engineering in the UVC. And then my father was a UVC graduate from, I think, 1952 or something like that. And then he joined the Air Force. And then I came about 30 odd years later. Um, and my brother-in-law was also from UVC. So we have a long tradition in the family of UVC. And it was, of course, at the time, the most prestigious college to get into, right? So outside of the IITs and the RECs, where Surathkal and Trichy were perhaps the top schools. If you got into UVC, you always took it, regardless of the branch. And obviously, over that time, a lot has changed. There's been a lot more new colleges that have come in the city, and infrastructure and stuff like that had fallen behind, both the physical infrastructure and equipment. But it's great to see that all being renovated. And I recently visited the college, and it was wonderful to see the new infrastructure that has come into place, and the continuous upgrades that are happening, which is just required in this industry. So our times, UVC, I don't know what the class strength is now, but I think our batch was the first time we had about 100 students in electrical engineering, and actually was the first batch which was more than 50% female. It was sort of an unusual thing when that happened. Um, and I think my memories of UVC, especially given how my career evolved over time, were largely about making the best friends who have continued to stay friends for life. Um, I did not pursue a career in the core areas of engineering that I studied, because I studied electrical engineering and I went off into avionics and flight control systems and so on, which is sort of an extension to control systems engineering that I studied in UVC. But I subsequently ended up working mostly in marketing sales roles, initially in the tech industry, and then subsequently more into the internet era and so on. And so I never really worked much as an engineer, from my UVC education per se. That being said, obviously, a lot of fond memories of the days at UVC. I think the college was very. I mean, there were some very dedicated professors for sure, but it was also a college in transition at the time. So in our batch, we ended up having a lot of lecturers who were not who were sort of transitioning out, and some in the college lecturers from Central College and others that used to come. It wasn't the best of times at UVC from an academic infrastructure perspective, but I'm glad to see that has changed, and that is starting to get better now. But the quality of the students was still extraordinary. So a lot of the progress that we made at that time was really interacting with each other, challenging each other over a period of time, over the course of college, actually. So those are my, I would say, memories of UVC itself. Fast forward to today, our batch still has a WhatsApp group. Quite a few of us are involved. I think we put together the donation towards the AV system, I think, for the EE department, the Zoom meeting room and things like that. So we're trying to get a little more actively involved. I think one of the things we had tried a couple of times, even simple things like, building new toilets in the college, getting some scholarship funds going, etc. We've over the years been quite on and off involved. And I think I really applaud this initiative because it brings back a lot of the alumni in contact with the college. And I think we have a very strong reputation of alumni around the industry, not just in India, but globally. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing the students restore some of the glory of the college because it's a very well respected college around the world, actually. So yeah, so it was a good time at UVC. I think it has been the foundation for all of us to achieve a lot more in life. And we all look for the opportunity to collaborate with the existing students moving forward as well.
That was very nice to hear, and it also gave us a glimpse of how the student life was back then. And coming to the strength, currently, computer science department has 120. It's only the information science and AIML whose strength is 60. All other departments have 120 is as the intake strength in the first year, and later on, lateral entry people get added up. That's how
Got
it
it.
is currently.
Actually, computer science was set up 2 years after I joined. So when we were in third year was the first batch of computer science, actually.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And sir, how was your life post UVC until you decided to switch to entrepreneurship? Because after UVC, you also did your master's in avionics field. Then, how was the switch from engineering background or technical background to entrepreneurship take place?
Uh, it's a long journey and nothing necessarily planned. A lot of things in life, I think it's good to have a plan, but it's also good to be open to other opportunities that might arise. And more often than not, those other opportunities end up being what you take. And, you can only live life one way, right? So you don't know what would have happened if you had stayed with the original plan, but make sure you enjoy the journey. I think that's my only advice to youngsters, right? Um, so I finished my undergrad in UVC in '87, and I got a fellowship to go to France for a couple of years for a master's program in flight control systems and avionics. So that was actually a master's thesis written and defended completely in French. And uh, studying in a foreign language is a very different experience. But it's also very cool because if you do well, you can say it was despite the language, and if you don't do well, it's always because of the language. So I think it's very intimidating to try to study in a foreign language, however, right? The systems were also very different. The French system is based on very pure and hardcore understanding of math. And if you look back and look at all of your theorems, you hear about Laplace and Fourier and all of these Cauchy, all these guys, right? So very strong tradition of pure research that was done in physics and math by the French. And so their entire education system is steeped on solving all problems as though they're sort of n-dimensional problems, right? So everything you solve is with an m by n matrix, and then even if I ask you what is 3 plus 2, they will create a vector A and a vector B and solve the vector arithmetic problem and then apply the specific numbers, which is actually how software is written, right? So, but adapting to that was a lot of effort, especially in the foreign language, right? So that was an extraordinary experience. And after that master's, I went initially to do a PhD, but ended up doing another master's in the US in a similar domain, again, flight control systems and avionics, which basically is control systems engineering, but applied to an aeroplane. But there are some very basic things that you start realizing when you do that. We all know Newton's second law of motion, the forces, mass times acceleration, and you can do a lot with that. But in an aircraft, the assumption in Newton's law is that mass remains constant. But in an aircraft, when it's burning fuel, the mass is changing every second, right? So solving the problems of controlling the plane with extraordinary turbulences that might arise, etc. It's a very humbling problem, especially when mass is changing, right? So you got to solve the problem around different operating points, and the enormity and the complexity of this problem. At least as the passenger today, when I sit in the plane and I appreciate the pinpoint landing that happens, when he presses the button at 40,000 feet and the plane comes, glides down and lands with precision with a 5-foot variance of where it originally was aiming to land. The amount of physics and aerodynamics and thermodynamics and, uh, you know, engineering that goes into that design is stunning, right? Especially, knock on wood, the level of repeatability man has been able to achieve over the course of several years. And then, of course, if you look at the space problem, that is like yet another, logarithmic scale of complexity. And to see what SpaceX has done today, when the rockets lift off, fire the satellites, and come back, and is able to grab it with the two toothpicks, so to speak. It is just actually stunning feats of engineering that are being accomplished here. And I had the opportunity to dabble around a little bit in that domain for some time. I ended up then going and working in industry. But I'm a very people person, so I don't necessarily like to sit at a desk and solve problems. I like to brainstorm a lot. I like to challenge people a lot. And so right from the beginning, I moved very quickly into sales and marketing, although in tech roles. Spent 7 years at a company called Integrated Systems that was one of the leading players in the segment of design tools for the aerospace industry and also the automotive industry. So I had the luxury of working at and at least being a supplier to the top automotive companies, whether it was the Hondas of the world, whether it was the BMW, Mercedes. They were all my customers. I used to keep going and visiting them, which is pretty cool. You're looking to someday hope to buy one of those cars, but here, I was going there, giving them, design simulation software and consulting with them on how these things are to be designed, how does the engine control work, how does anti-lock braking work, how does suspension design work. And whether it was Ford or General Motors or, as I said, the Japanese guys or the European guys, right? I used to keep visiting a lot of them. Obviously, in Europe, the language was knowing the language, and knowing one of the languages was a big plus. Um, and the same thing with the aerospace industry guys also, right? France has a very strong aerospace tradition, and the US as well. So I spent a lot of time in sales and marketing roles over there. I then got into the internet domain. I was in the Bay Area in the 90s, and that's when the Netscape came out, and then the whole .com era happened. Ended up working at Xerox PARC, which is actually the bed of all the innovation in the space, right? Xerox Palo Alto Research Center is where Ethernet was developed, is where the mouse was developed, is where the Windows concept was developed. And I was working in an area called digital rights management, which is basically licensing of content or technology for licensing of content. And then ended up working in a couple of other places before I moved back to India. And it was not all rosy, by the way. I've had extremely tough years over the years. So for example, in 1992, when I was graduating with my master's and looking for a job, I was also married at the time. It was a year of severe recession in the US. And I was literally down to $300 in the bank before we got lucky, managed to find a job. And then after that, things got a lot better. But I've been through everything, including being laid off, multiple times. So I read in the newspapers, Microsoft laid off so many people, Oracle laid off so many people, which is happening today with the whole AI retooling. In North America, in particular, the American companies, it's a very common thing that does happen to people, and you have to fight and get back on your feet. So, it's something that happens, and one needs to just learn to cope with these things. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often in life, and you end up doing pretty okay. So that was the US part of my life. I came back to India in 2003, mostly to sort of on a holiday, but I really liked what I was seeing in India. It was the first wave of the mobile boom that was happening in India. And that's when I sort of had this idea that, well, we could use a mobile to make payments. And so I came to India largely to set up a mobile payments startup. And that's where of course, when you're in Silicon Valley, you're seeing a lot of startups being created. And so I thought the big opportunity was going to be in India. And I was right about that. but not necessarily about the timing. And one of the big lessons that I took away from my stint as an entrepreneur in the payments industry here was that timing is as important as, if not more important than technology and so on, right? So I started MCheck, or I was brought in to run MCheck probably 5 years too early, way before Paytm. This is in 2006. And company achieved quite a bit of success, but never really made it big. I then, left and joined the Aadhaar program because it was starting out and got to work about 18 months on that. And in parallel, I started two companies. One was ZipDial, which was a company that really innovated on the concept of a missed call, started using it for businesses. Until then, you had a thing called premium text where you would send a 3 rupee message to get the cricket score. And with ZipDial, we turned that into giving a missed call, which was obviously toll free, and you'd get a text message back to the score. And there were a variety of use cases that we started. That company we sold to Twitter, or X now, I guess, for I don't know, 30 or $40 million at the time. And then in parallel, I started Ezetap again with two different sets of co-founders. In fact, I had a 4-bedroom villa in Koromangala that we had rented, 3 bedrooms where the ZipDial team would work, and the fourth bedroom was the first office of Ezetap. And this is, I'm talking 2010, 2011 timeframe. And in both cases, I had co-founders, and I said, "Look, I'm not going to be running the company, but I'll be the chairman of the board and sort of the more of the product guy." And EasyTap was started with Bhaktha, was also 2 years my junior at UVCE. I didn't know him at the UVCE time, but we met separately in another context, and I'll come back to that story later. Um, but I always, enjoy tinkering with new things. And even to this day, as a VC, the moment there's some new AI tool, I would have gone set up an account, maybe hit the credit card for $20 to try it out and try doing things, whether it's with Lovable, whether it's with Replit, whatever tools are out there, and try to see, how building things can be different and how things can be accelerated, and what new concepts can be put into place. Even though I'm not necessarily building products with those things, it's really to visualize and to conceptualize. And you know, we started ZipDial and EasyTap, and then both companies were sort of funded and were running. And that's when I decided with my other friends that we should start a venture capital fund, and that's where Prime Ventures was started.
So, can you please share your journey of building EasyTap with Bhaktha Keshavachar? I mean, you did mention there was some story, so I'm very interested to know that. Along with that, from building your own startups to now supporting others building their startup, what are the few changes in perspective did you observe, sir?
Yeah. So EasyTap started because, in fact, there's a device, the AirPod, right? This is exactly what the first version of EasyTap looked like. If I was in my work office, I actually have all the prototypes that we had built. Um, the idea was to say, can we? So I had done MCheck, and it was in the payment space, and I understood payments very well. And if you know payments, there basically are two parts to. One is the payer and the recipient side, right? And so the recipient side typically needs a terminal, although with the static QR code, you don't need that anymore. But at least if you look at paying with the card or something, there's a terminal that will be used, and it's a very secure piece of hardware, right? And with MCheck, we were really doing sort of a earlier generation version of UPI, and we didn't have the need for anything other than SMS text messaging. But I realized that the payments world has two sides to it. And so I said, okay, let me try to solve the payments acceptance side, because these terminals were very expensive. It used to cost upwards of probably 45,000 rupees, when we got started. And maybe it was coming down to about 20,000 rupees. And we came up with a terminal that was 1,000 rupees, right? But it had to be attached to a cell phone. Initially, the phones used to have the audio jack, and later we went to Bluetooth, right? And I was trying to do this over a voice call. So you just dial a number, and then you swipe a card. The electronics would read the data from the card and then transmit it as an audio signal all the way to the server. Um, so as it turns out, if you look at the old landlines that used to exist, which your generation may have hardly interacted with, there was what's called touch tone, right? So when you press a button, each button makes a different sound. So each number makes a different sound, right? And so the server can recognize that and say, oh, you're dialing 3 for customer service or dial 4 for something else to speak with an op agent, press 0, right? All these things actually recognize different tones. And I was trying to simulate that through software and transmit it over a cellular network. And I was chatting and somebody introduced me to Bhaktha and we started talking about it. And he said, well, so Bhaktha's journey, by the way, after UVCE, he went to the US, did his master's in Arizona State. Then he worked in Intel for several years, like 15 years, and he came back to India. And he worked for a few years here with Intel, and then he left, and he was also trying to be an entrepreneur. And he was very strong technically, right? And he stayed technical throughout his life, including his new startup that he's working on, Chara. So he then told me, I have spent a lot of time in the whole GSM technology stack. I can give you a theoretical reason why this is not going to work, right? What you're trying to do. And so I was obviously crestfallen. I said, I don't agree with you. Of course, I'm going to make it work. It's almost working here. So in the prototype, he said, yeah, it'll be always almost working, but it will never work. And so he explained to me that, in a landline, when you press the button, the sound is generated by the phone, and that's what gets transmitted. But in a cellular network, when you press the buttons, it's a control character that gets sent to the server, and the tone is generated at the server, not at the phone. And I had no idea about all of this stuff, right? But he was the expert in this space. And so basically, we had a problem where we had to transmit 80 bytes of data, and 95% of the data would be accurate 100% of the time, versus 100% of the data being accurate 95% of the time. Right? And there's a very big nuance there, because you're always transmitting only 95% accurate, but you don't know which 5% is wrong, right? So we tried to do a lot of error coding and all of that stuff, but it was basically unsuccessful. And so he knew all along that it would never work, but he gave it a shot. And then we later decided, by then, the advances were so rapid, right, in front of our eyes, that by the time we concluded that this could not work, the networks had changed, the phones had changed. We started seeing Android phones coming into the market. We started seeing at least 3G networks at the time. And of course, by the time we really went mainstream, it became 4G networks as well. So the old approach of trying to do all this on a voice line was sort of irrelevant, because data became much less expensive, basically became free. And these are things that, are lessons to be learned by people also, right? Some of these short-term opportunities just go away, right? It's what the venture capitalists call an ice cube in the sun, right? So we went back to the drawing board and said, let's come up with a new design, new architecture, and then built out the product. And of course, managed to raise a fair amount of capital, venture capital. And subsequently, rolled out the product. We were the only company to build a certified point of sale terminal in India. It was otherwise only being made in Europe and in the US and in China. And getting that certification is a very difficult, complex task. I won't get into the details, but basically when you're entering a PIN, right, it's a very secure piece of data. And it has to be the sophistication in the terminal. It was mind-blowing for us, because we learned along the way all the complexities that go on, the encryption technology, the physical infrastructure security that goes into designing of a point of sale terminal. It's actually quite complex. And the business was quite successful, but I think over a period of time, it was clear that the variety of devices that the Chinese would do, etc., just made it a lot harder for us to compete at the hardware level. However, we had a lot of expertise at the software level, and the business became a software business. So we would get the imported terminals and effectively run Android on them and make this a smart terminal. So earlier the only thing you could do is enter the amount and swipe the credit card. But we ended up through software adding a lot more features and capabilities. And as it became more of a software company, I think it was much more scalable. And that's when Razorpay came and acquired the company for like $150 million type buyout. So that was the sort of successful outcome with Ezetap that we had. I think it had a much bigger opportunity and could have been a much larger company, but I think also in hindsight we got a good outcome out of that company as well. So that was the journey with Ezetap. But throughout, as I said, when I started both ZipDial and Ezetap, I was very clear that I wanted to be in a non-daily operating role. I wanted to be much more of someone who's associated with multiple companies rather than with one company. And that's when I, partnered with Shripati and my other partner Bala, and later Amit Somani to start what is now Prime Venture Partners. Um, and venture capital is sort of a very interesting business because there can be an approach where you invest in a large number of companies and give minimum support and hope that the company does well and you make a lot of money. But the more exciting approach for me and my partner is because we have all been entrepreneurs. The idea was work closely alongside a small number of companies and try to make them very successful. And while we are not taking the ownership and responsibility of running the company, we are always very closely working with the founders. That's the approach we took. There's no right or wrong. Both are very valid approaches. And in fact, ours is sort of probably the harder approach to do because you are betting on a very few number of companies. So hopefully some of them will end up doing well. And over the years, I have learned to be less of a doer and more of a guide. I always say we're both a mentor and a tormentor from time to time for the founders and the team. Opportunity, and I'm really privileged to be doing what I'm doing right now in a time of great opportunity for India as well. And as the country goes from a 2 trillion to a 4 trillion to a 7 trillion to a 10 trillion economy over the next few years, entrepreneurship is going to play a key role in uh, some of that scale up, right? I think there'll be government initiatives, there'll be large corporate initiatives, there'll be MNCs coming in, but ultimately entrepreneurs are also going to play at least a third of that growth is going to come from new companies that don't exist yet today, right? And we have an opportunity to get in at the ground floor and support these companies and contribute to the nation building while also making hopefully a lot of money in the process, right? And that's sort of the key focus for me.
Got it. So that was indeed a very insightful things which you just told. So for students thinking about startup, what are the few
Mhm.
problems that they should be paying more attention into, and what's your take on the current funding environment in India?
Yeah, my first day as a venture capitalist, I was told, good companies don't die of starvation, but can die of indigestion. So, don't worry about the funding environment, right? If you've got something solid that you're working on, money will find its way to you, right? So my reaction is, never to worry about the problems you cannot solve. Focus on the problems you can solve, right? And first of all, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you have to solve a problem that excites you, that keeps you up no matter what, and it doesn't feel like you're staying awake. It just feels like you can't sleep because it's so exciting, right? And that happened to me with ZipDial, that happened to me with Ezetap. I couldn't stop myself from working on these things. And even now, several of the companies we back. So that is a fundamental requirement, right? And that means that as a founder, you have to be extremely passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. So many founders, find a cute solution to a problem and they get very passionate about the solution that they have. And that is actually the biggest mistake. The most crucial thing is you may not have the solution, but you're obsessed with the problem. right? And you go out of your way to understand the problem, the impact of the problem, who is facing this problem. Is it a large enough problem? Is there any real value in a solution? What should a solution accomplish for it to be really seen as a solution to the problem? What would people pay? How big is this problem? How big is the pain? How large can it get? Right. So understanding the problem, when I look at founders, I almost don't care what they're doing about the problem, right? I want to know, do they really believe in the problem? And is this something that they look at it and say, if I solve this problem in my life, my life will be full, right? And that's all I'm interested in doing, right? I don't know where the solution is going to come from. I have some ideas, I have some prototype, I'm trying it out. People think it might work. All these things are fine, but if the problem identification is wrong, you don't have a business, right? If you've got the right problem, you may not have the right solution, but you're already, I would say 70% of the way there if you have identified the right problem. Then there's the second part of, okay, am I the right person to solve this problem in the first place, right? Of course, there might be, healthcare related problems to be solved, but you're an aerospace engineer, you're probably not the right guy to solve this problem. Or there may be healthcare problems that actually some of your experience in fluid dynamics and computational fluid dynamics might play a big role in solving them, but you need to partner with another person who might have more of the clinical side of the experience and so on, right? So very important to be obsessed about the problem. Very important to know that you are the right person to solve this problem. That's not to say you're the only person, right? Others might also be capable, but you are one. There's a logical reason why you will succeed in this space, right? You could succeed in this space, and then it has to be a well-formed team, right? Very rarely do you find single founder companies succeed. In almost all cases, for a Sachin Bansal, there was a Binny Bansal. For either Zomato founders, there are others around. So every single really successful company has a good, strong founding team. They may not all be visible, but they exist, right? And it's very important to get someone else who's also equally obsessed about the problem, but has the complementary capability to you as a founder. So if you are a strong outbound business development, marketing, sales person, you need another person who's much more of an operations person, much more of a product person, much more of someone who'll get things done, right? The first guy is the hustler, is going out, talking to people, building excitement for the company, raising the funding, and then the other guy is solving the real problem for the customer. And it's like two sides of a coin. You really can't have one without the other, right? And having one is having one is really incomplete, right? So the founding team has to be formed well, and then you need to, of course, start putting some initial runs on the board. And thankfully, a large number of infrastructure changes like mobile and cloud and now AI and all of the stuff that is coming about is dramatically shortening the cycles here, right? So what used to take, for check payments, I had to set up my own data center and get it certified. Today, you can then you could go to the cloud and then basically rent a server and get started, right? That's the state of the union. But the application had to be built from scratch. But today, the application also, you can go to prototyping tools like a Replit or Lovable or something like that, and at least conceptualize it, talk to customers, and see is this even something that could work, that could be of value. So I think the cycles are getting much shorter, right? So in the past, founders would say, oh, well, I need to raise money so that I can build a prototype. Today, nobody's going to give you money for a prototype, right? Because it's basically free. You can just build it yourself for $20, So things like that, I think, starts to become very important for people to understand that you have to be seen as somebody who's going to go down this path and solve this problem, whether an investor is going to come with you or not, right? So it's very important that you're building your business and you're giving an opportunity to a potential investor to participate in it. You're not dependent on the investor for your success, right? You're going to be building it. And I think money will only chase companies where investors believe that the founders will be successful with or without them. So the upper hand has got to be with the entrepreneur, right? Because one entrepreneur, there are 20 investors, somebody will fund this company. And so, while it appears that investors have a position of strength, it's really in a good company, it's the other way around. It's the founders who have the position of strength, right? But broadly, I would say, understand the problem, be able to justify why to yourself and to others why you are the best of this person to solve this problem, get the right co-founder in place, start building, mock-ups and prototypes and talking to customers, get some early traction on board, and then, there are good things that could happen here. There's a very simple formula. It's not easy to execute on. It's very easy to get distracted because you will look at it and say, oh, I can use this for AirPods. And somebody say, why don't you put a mic in this itself? And maybe, you don't even need the phone. And you can start getting distracted with these stupid features people ask you, right? And they're not likely to be customers. What you want is somebody to take your product. This is what I want to buy, right? And not thing. And in the most successful startups become successful when they focus on fewer things. This is a business where less is more, right? It's okay to fail at one thing and then shift to something else. But it's not okay to try to do both at the same time because you'll fail at both, right? So probability of a startup succeeding is already like, I read somewhere that less than 2% of ideas turn into startups and less than 2% of startups turn into, get to the next level, right? So the mortality rate is like, the success rate is 0.04% here from an idea to actually making it somewhere, right? And then after that, also, it's a question of are you going to be large enough or are you just going to be sort of putzing around, right? So it's a very challenging journey, right? But it is extraordinarily exciting when the company starts getting some positive momentum.
Got it. So that was indeed a very practical advice, and I'm sure it will give clarity to those who are planning to take their first step. And I myself also realize the importance of the obsession which you should have with the problem in order to get started with things, especially in the field of entrepreneurship. And now, coming to the last question, sir, what are some skill sets that you think our current college students should possess if they want to develop or start something of their own someday?
Yeah. I would say the number one thing here is hustle, right? I think I'm assuming, expertise and all that will be there and all that is part of the course. Um, I think obsession, we talked already about obsessing about a problem and stuff like that, right? So I'll ignore all that. But once you have all of that as well, then it's critical that you are able to, put yourself in front of others, right? And nobody's going to wait. Like people ask me, okay, I say, okay, drop me an email. And they say, what is your email address, right? I don't like to give my email address to anyone because they should be able to guess it. You know what my name is, you know what my firm name is. Take a guess here. What is it going to be? Sanjay.Swamy, Sanjay, whatever, Sanjay_Swamy, right? Send it all the bloody email addresses and get one will go through, right? Because tomorrow you're going to try to reach out to a customer, a senior executive at HDFC Bank, right? You may not know his email address, you have to guess it, right? And you have to figure it out. So hustle is like, very rarely talked about, but it is critically important, right? You make a lot of the number of times I have found a way to bump into somebody that I wanted to meet, right? That's how business is done. Business doesn't happen because somebody is going to very kindly, introduce you to someone, right? You got to go demand that introduction. If you don't get the introduction, what are you going to do? Are you going to not meet that person? You're going to find some way to do it, right? So that is a very, very important thing. The second thing is, of course, presentation skills, communication skills. These are also things that people take for granted. The best product never necessarily wins. The best communicated, best marketed product is the one that's going to win. And you better learn to be able to be a little in your face, to be a little, sometimes even intrusive, sometimes even irritating, doesn't really matter. You should know some boundaries, but I think broadly speaking, you have to be successful. You have to make your company successful, right? And if you have to be pushy, you have to be pushy. Nobody's going to wait for you. World is not going to wait for you, right? Um, And the third is just sheer hard work. This is China became successful because of the 996 work ethic that they had in the last, 20 years. I don't see that much in India, by the way, right? But good entrepreneurs will have that work ethic, right? If not 997, at least 996, right? I think you need 996 so that you have a slight balance or 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. But that's what it takes. Companies are not built with 9 a.m. to 5 a.m., 5 p.m. attitudes, right? So, uh, surrounding yourself with people like that, I think all of these things, and you have to practice it yourself, right? If you're not practicing it yourself, you can't expect other people to do it. And lastly, I would say one thing that I learned much later in life, I don't even know if I've learned it, but I like people to learn, is understanding basics of accounting. Right. At the end of the day, all of these things are about numbers, right? Money is not going to magically show up in the bank. So you have to understand the accounting here, and you have to be able to understand how you make money. These are all very critical things. And one more thing, if I will add, is learning to say no. It is unbelievable how many companies fail because people just don't put their foot down and say, "No, this is not our business. I don't do this, right? I mean, I do this, this, and this. But you want me to do that? Sorry, I don't do it." Rather than saying, "Well, I could do it," and I was saying, and you sort of have a lot of feature creep that ends up killing the company because you didn't focus on the three this is that you had to do, and you ended up doing that. Um, and so these are things that it's actually, in hindsight, very boring. Has to be super disciplined, and if you keep doing the right thing over and over again, uh, there's a reasonable chance that you will be able to build something successful, right? There is no guarantee in this, right? So I always say, and you'll see this on my LinkedIn tagline, everything is my mission or my mantra for all of this is enjoy the journey, because the outcome is never guaranteed, but the journey is guaranteed, right? That the journey will happen. You better be in it to enjoy the journey. There is no outcome in all of this thing, right? The journey is all that matters here. And if you can do that, I think, over a period of time and stay patient, stick to your conviction, don't be sort of easily swayed. Um, I think, many times you will prove other people wrong, because entrepreneurship is about doing something that other people have not done, right? For the most part, right? And that's where the biggest outcomes are going to be. So that the fact that nobody has done it before doesn't mean it can't be done or you can't do it. Uh, but along the way, 99% of the people will tell you this is never going to work, right? There is a reason it doesn't exist. All these bogus statements that we make. Sometimes we might be right, but if you are passionate about the problem, then you need to give it your. What you don't want is the regret of saying, somebody told me it won't work, and I didn't try it, and then somebody else, did it, and they were very successful, right? So, uh, if you are passionate about something, you should just go for it.
Got it, sir. And that was a great set of advices that you gave, and I'm sure it'll help all the budding entrepreneurs watching this particular podcast episode to shape themselves better for the future. Whatever you told your golden advice, I hope they inculcate during their journey. So, with
Thank you.
that, I would like to conclude this episode, sir. And I would like to thank UVC Graduates Association and my seniors to give this opportunity to me to record this podcast. And it was indeed an honor to host this podcast. And I hope you had a great time as well.
Enjoyed it thoroughly, and I hope to see some really exciting entrepreneurship ideas and startups coming out of UVC in the coming years, and hopefully to collaborate with several of them.
Soon.
Cheers.